What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And as always, we have ourselves a jam-packed show as we have quite a bit to get into in the world of volleyball, such as Cathedral Catholic. They did it. They are undefeated CIF State Open Division champions. They swept St.Francis. How'd they do it? And how many sets did they lose overall in the season? Also, we had some NCAA women's volleyball matchups happening. Florida and Kentucky are neck and neck in the SEC race, while Wisconsin is all alone in first place after Ohio State dropped a couple of bad losses this past week. Also, Stanford is inching closer and closer to the Pac-12 championship, as Oregon is still on their tails, but they had a little bit of a scare. Also, we have the last week of the NCAA women's volleyball regular season, as it's a home stretch to see who's going to be advancing to the big dance. Hand me a volleyball. Set the net. I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful Monday afternoon, Monday evening, Monday wherever you are listening from. Either way, you have tuned in live to episode 169 of Set Point. And without any further delay, let's get this volleyball show going. But first and foremost, Set Point would not be where it's at without IE Sports Radio providing the platform. You can follow IE Sports Radio on several different social media platforms such as Twitter, Instagram, and on TikTok with the handle at IE Sports Radio. Also, IE Sports Radio is available for all you Facebook users out there. You just gotta type in IE and then sports, then radio in the search bar. Also, IE Sports Radio has a website, www.iesportsradio, and when you go there, you'll see a Patreon link at the top, which starts at $5 a month once you click it and you accept. This will get you a shout from all of our shows, including this one, and higher tiers include IE Sports Radio merchandise, access to IESRU, the podcasting university of IE Sports Radio, and even a chance to be featured on a segment of our flagship show, The Defining Moment, with the one, the only Larry B. Because for the past 8 years and counting, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all sports cities around the country. All the while, we've been continuing to be by the fans and for the fans. With your help, we are ready to take the next biggest step. Thank you to everyone for all of your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that sports. Big shout out to our Patreon supporters, Bay Area Raised Apparel, Key to the Gate, Marcus Losgreat, and a donor that wishes to remain anonymous. And with all that said and done, let's get on into it, ladies and gentlemen. So, first and foremost, we have a lot of volleyball to talk about. As I also need to mention, as we have the chat room going on here, if you're listening live, you could follow the chat room as Larry B. pops in. He says, "Good evening, Teran." Adam Karnick, who just got done with his show, says, "The man, the myth, the legend, Teran Rodriguez." And Mike Pat, with his everlasting anecdote, good evening, Teran, FSU win it all yet? No, and they might be borderline of making the NCAA tournament. But that's for a little bit later in the show. But overall, we have a lot of volleyball to discuss, as we're actually not going to jump into some NCAA women's volleyball just yet, as we're actually going to jump into some NCAA men's volleyball, as I don't know if you all saw this on my Twitter account, but the Hawaii men's volleyball team has released its schedule for the 2023 season, and I think all volleyball fans have been anticipating this schedule release. Okay, it's not that dramatic, but it is what it is. So as we all know, Hawaii is the reigning NCAA men's volleyball champion. They're the two-time, or back-to-back NCAA men's volleyball reigning champion, as they return a majority of their players from last season, and they are out for a vengeance. And I just saw them a few weeks ago, not like a few weeks ago, but like sometime, I think it was like 3 weeks ago. It was before the month of November, but I saw them play. They looked as strong as ever, even in a scrimmage, let alone an exhibition match. They looked great as ever. So for Hawaii, they kick off their season on January 12th and 13th, a Thursday and a Friday, against Ball State. This is actually going to be played at home, Simplify Arena at Stan Sheriff Center. So as we all know, Hawaii was the team that ended Ball State's historic career, as Ball State was playing for Don Shondell, but unfortunately they fell to Hawaii in the Final Four in 5 sets. So this is going to be a very highly anticipated matchup. And for Hawaii, they're probably going to show little to no mercy. Now, last year, Ball State beat Hawaii in the regular season twice. However, you got to remember, Hawaii was without a majority of its players due to illnesses and injuries and whatnot. So on January 18th and January 20th, Hawaii will also host St.Francis of Brooklyn. And then on January 25th, Hawaii will hit the road to Charlotte, North Carolina to take on Queens. And then the day after, January 26th, a Thursday, they'll hit the road to Belmont to take on Belmont Abbey. And then 2 days after that, they'll still remain in North Carolina, as they'll head down to Wilson as they'll play Barton. So that is the first part of their schedule in the books. That's been basically the first month. They actually have a little bit of a week off, as their next matchup following the Barton match is going to be against Stanford. They actually have 2 matches against Stanford on February 10th and February 11th, a Friday and a Saturday, and it's going to be at Stanford. So Hawaii hits the road to NorCal to take on Stanford. Then Hawaii returns home to its humble abode to welcome Concordia Irvine on February 16th and 17th, a Thursday and a Friday. Then on February 22nd and February 24th, a Wednesday and a Friday, Hawaii welcomes LIU. Then on March 1st and March 3rd, Hawaii welcomes Pepperdine. Pepperdine is a team that I think is vastly improved and I think can do some damage. Remember, Pepperdine was the team that won the MPSF last year, so I expect them to probably have a good portion of their team. Especially, they'll probably have Bryce Dvorak back, so there's something to look forward to. And then Hawaii has brought back the Outrigger Volleyball Invitational. It took a 1-year hiatus off because of COVID and whatnot, but it is back and better than ever, as Hawaii plays Purdue of Fort Wayne on March 9th. Then they play Penn State on March 10th. And then on March 11th, they play UCLA, which I think is a great little end to their regular season. And Penn State and UCLA are both really good opponents. Like, Penn State returns the majority of their team, and UCLA should be just as good as they were last year. Purdue Fort Wayne also can be good. Like, last year they were kind of the Cinderella of the MIVA, but unfortunately they fell short to Ball State. But for Purdue Fort Wayne, that's also going to be a decent little matchup right there for Hawaii. So, good way to end the non-conference slate for Hawaii. As jumping into their Big West Conference schedule, they actually play Long Beach State, believe it or not, in their first weekend of Big West Conference play. So I don't know if that was by force, but it is. But whoever designed Hawaii's schedule, good job on actually getting that on the first weekend. Like, that could not have been scheduled any better. So, Hawaii Long Beach State, that's the biggest matchup right there for Hawaii right there. Like, the Big West is pretty much going to be decided between Long Beach State and Hawaii, and for Hawaii, this is basically the early possibility of the regular season Big West Conference Championship. So then after they face Long Beach State, Hawaii hits the road to Northridge to take on CSUN, Cal State Northridge, on March 24th and 25th, a Friday and a Saturday. Then Hawaii will remain in California, though they may just pop back to Hawaii, but it still doesn't make sense. regardless, Hawaii will remain in California to take on UC Santa Barbara in a 2-match series on March 31st, a Friday, and April 1st, a Saturday. Then on April 7th and April 8th, a Friday and a Saturday, Hawaii will return back to Honolulu to welcome UC Irvine. And then on April 14th and 15th, Hawaii welcomes UC San Diego to conclude its regular season and its Big West Conference schedule. So that is pretty much that for Hawaii's schedule. Something to note is that the Big West Conference tournament is basically on April 20th all the way through April 22nd. And your boy is going to be there on pretty much all 4 days. Or not all 4 days, all 3 days. From Thursday all the way to Saturday. So best believe I will be in the house providing the updates and the video clips and whatnot. So that is Hawaii's men's volleyball schedule right there in a nutshell. So for me, Hawaii has a lot of good and challenging opponents. Like obviously you've got Ball State, you've got Penn State, you've got UCLA. Pepperdine is a challenging opponent. Stanford, I think, is underrated. So for me, Hawaii is going to be quite potent, especially when they end the non-conference schedule and they hop on into Big West Conference play. As right off the bat, they're getting Long Beach State. That's already their number 1 seed versus number 2 seed possibility. And for Hawaii, you got to remember, Hawaii didn't win the NCAA tournament, the Big West Conference regular season championship. They actually finished second in what was probably one of the more weirder conferences out there, just because the tournament is what truly gives you your auto bid. But I can expect Hawaii to pretty much vying for not only a Big West Conference championship in the tournament, but for something even deeper, because this is a Hawaii team that returns a majority of its team. They return all their starters, and they obviously bring back their coach, Charlie Wade, and I really think that they obviously have a target on their back, yes, but again, they have more experience, and like I said, they return pretty much the same players from last year, so they're all having a year or two having meshed well with one another. And I guess you could also throw the COVID year as well, back in 2021, where they all meshed with one another, and I think Hawaii has made themselves stronger, and their up-and-coming class is going to make them even better. So Hawaii is definitely going to be a team to watch for. It's basically going to be Long Beach State and Hawaii as the two heavy favorites in not only in the Big West, but to win the entire NCAA men's volleyball championship. But there could be other teams that could arise, like Penn State is going to be good. Ball State could also be up there. UCLA might be good. USC could be sneaky good. Pepperdine could be up there. UC Irvine's going to play a tough schedule, and they return a bunch of guys, and they got a few transfers in there. So for Hawaii, they're obviously going to need to play as much stiff competition as they can, but I think Hawaii is going to be able to rise above the competition, especially when they're playing at Hawaii or Stan Sheriff Center. I'll always refer to it as Stan Sheriff Center, but I guess it's Simplify Arena, but I digress. So I'm excited to see what Hawaii's men's volleyball team can bring to the table this year, and I feel it's going to be a fun season for Coach Charlie Wade and his team. So that is that for NCAA men's volleyball talk. Jumping on over to some high school girls volleyball. So this past Saturday, I actually attended the CIF State Open Division championship between Cathedral Catholic and St.Francis. This was in girls volleyball, and this was the battle of two unbeaten teams from different regions. Cathedral Catholic actually came in 42-0, and they only dropped one set. And believe it or not, they actually dropped that set earlier in the week. So flashback before we head on into that finals match, heading on over to the regionals, Cathedral Catholic played Mira Costa. And for those that don't know, Mira Costa is the juggernaut in terms of like high school girls volleyball. I guess you could make the argument for high school boys volleyball as well, but they're mainly well known in girls volleyball. So in the Cathedral Catholic versus Mira Costa match, something to note, Cathedral Catholic did not have Julia Blishanov, as she hurt her ankle a couple Saturdays ago, and she has been out ever since. So it was going to be a little bit of an uphill climb for Cathedral Catholic. But the first set, Cathedral Catholic brought it against Mira Costa. They won it 25-21. The second set was a complete flip-flop. Mira Costa really brought their A game. Now, I've seen Mira Costa play play at least once, and they have such an effective offense. They serve the ball well. They don't really make too many mistakes. And Mira Costa really socked it to Cathedral Catholic as they won the second set 25-15, as Cathedral Catholic's straight set streak of 98 straight sets won had been snapped. And that was their first loss set of the season. It was very surprising, but I had a feeling Mira Costa was going to bring it just because Mira Costa has some stud athletes. They have 8 players going to play college volleyball, and they have 16 seniors overall. So I hate to say this, but unfortunately not everyone was going to get to play, but they have lots of depth. So the third set, Cathedral Catholic, basically, they were losing that second set might have been the best thing for them because it took all the pressure off them, and they don't have to basically worry about being perfect, as they won the third set 25, I think it was like 25-11, 25-12. Either way, they thumped Mira Costa in that third set. And then the fourth set, Cathedral Catholic jumped out to an early lead. Mira Costa, unfortunately, could not get it together, as Cathedral Catholic's Noemie Glover, who is bound for Oregon, she just took over the match. She was such a catalyst for Cathedral Catholic after Julia Bliashov went out with the ankle injury. Either way, Mira Costa won the fourth set 25-18 and the match, advancing to the state championship. Now we'll get on into the Cathedral Catholic St. Francis matchup. So the first set, Cathedral Catholic actually got off to a sluggish start. St. Francis was actually serving well, and their hitters Taylor Williams and Aaron Curtis were both putting on a show offensively. So Cathedral Catholic needed a timeout, and the timeout worked perfection for them as they started getting it together, as Noemie Glover, she was just pounding kill after kill, and basically Cathedral Catholic really turned it around. They did run into a little bit of trouble trying to close the set, as Aaron Curtis was serving up service aces toward the end of the set, but eventually Cathedral Catholic closed out the match with a block from Milan Bayless, as Cathedral Catholic won the first set 25-21. Second set, Cathedral Catholic just stomped all over St. Francis. They got off to a much better start, and this time it wasn't Noemie Glover. It was actually Milan Bayless and middle blocker Jenna Haynes, who actually didn't play on Cathedral Catholic prior to this season. But either way, Cathedral Catholic took the second set 25-16. Yeah, it was 25-16, as they looked so much more dominant. Like, no offense to St. Francis, but I just feel Cathedral Catholic was just much more battle-tested. Obviously, they have the depth on their roster. They had 10 seniors, and I feel a good chunk of them are playing college volleyball. And then the third set, Cathedral Catholic actually got off to a much faster start as well. But St. Francis, to their credit, they got it going after Cathedral Catholic kind of hit 14, as St. Francis was serving tough. They were blocking the ball well. And Taylor Williams and Aaron Curtis, they kept them in the match. Whitney Wallace, who is the daughter of Archbishop Mitty and former Santa Clara coach John Wallace, was dicking everything, but Cathedral Catholic was starting to create some separation as the set went on. They eventually led 23-21, and they led 24-22. St. Francis scores a point, and a good timeout called by Juliana Kahn, the head coach of Cathedral Catholic, and then Cathedral Catholic closed out the match with a kill in the middle from Jenna Haynes, and that was how Cathedral Catholic won, as they won the third set 25-23, and they won the CIF State Championship, which I want to say is like their fourth CIF State title in its program's history. I don't know the whereabouts of their division, just because that's just too much. That's a lot of history to go back in terms of Cathedral Catholic. But I know St. Francis has won state championships prior to this season. And looking at the State Open Division Finals program, this is actually the sixth state championship for Cathedral Catholic, as they now are 6-1 in state championship matches, while St. Francis falls to 9-4 in state championship matches. But they have 9 CIF state championships, and they are doing great things with Lake Merchant. Believe it or not, I want to say Lake Merchant is only in his first year, as he got hired like in August of this past fall, this past August, and if this is the case of him being only in his first year, he's really done an excellent job. But just because to have an undefeated season up until the state championship game is very impressive. And St. Francis is well known for having some talented girls volleyball teams. So for me, I think that St. Francis has nothing to be sad about. I felt so heartbroken seeing one of their players in tears, but sometimes you just run into the buzzsaw. And this was a quote I actually did hear from. This is one of the worst feelings in the world, but it's not the worst feelings for the players, it's not the worst things for the players. It's not the worst thing to happen. It's the worst thing to happen as an athlete, but it's not the worst thing to happen for the person in general. So I think for St. Francis, they can walk away knowing that they tried and they pushed Cathedral Catholic to the brink in that third set, despite all that what happened. So I actually took down some stats. I only got kills and service aces. So in terms of the service ace, service error battle, Cathedral Catholic only had 2 service aces, but they only missed 3 serves, and they really serve tough. They can serve really tough against certain opponents. As for St. Francis, they had 6 service aces and 7 service errors. They had 4 service errors in that third set alone, so that's already 4 points right off the bat. If they don't have now obviously you can't control the serves. Like, you can't just tell an athlete, hey, or tell a player, hey, you got to make your serves. Like, if they don't serve tough, then you're going to be at the mercy of the opponent. But if you're serving soft, then it's basically going to be a free point unless your block is good, your players are in position to dig the ball, that sort of thing. So in terms of kill leaders, Cathedral Catholic was led by Noemie Glover, Oregon-bound player, as she had 13 kills, while Jenna Haynes added 12 kills, and Noemie Bayless added 9 kills. I guess I should also make note that Riley Patterson added 4 kills. Cathedral Catholic did not have Julia Blyashov, as she was still out with the ankle injury. She said she might be back in a couple weeks, which means she'll be back playing club volleyball in no time, and she's going to still do great things for Stanford. She was on the youth team from earlier in the fall, and I think she's got a bright future ahead of her. After the match, we actually we waited a little while me and the Cathedral Catholic fans, we had to wait a little bit of a while for the Cathedral Catholic team to come out, because they were still in the media room taking pictures, and then I guess there was like a press conference, which I didn't have like a media pass, but it's all good. I just attended as a spectator. But after everything was all said and done, after Cathedral Catholic came out and were welcomed by their fans and their parents, I actually caught up with Jenna Haynes following her team's win over St. Francis. All right, Jenna, your team became CIF State Open Division champions, and you went undefeated, and you only dropped 1 set. How big is this moment for you all?
It's amazing. We've been waiting all season for this, and every time since I played volleyball, I've been waiting for this moment. And it's amazing because I have the best team that surrounds me, and they all encourage me and push me each day to play. And I love it, like winning it for the team. It's amazing, and it's something I'll never forget.
Now, last year you fell short in the regionals. Like, what was the feeling like back then, and what was like the game plan for you all going into the season?
So I actually was not on the team last year because I transferred. Yeah.
Okay, but going to this season, Julia unfortunately got hurt a couple weeks ago. Like, how much momentum did you all lose, and how did you all regain that momentum going into state playoffs?
So Julia is a big leader on our team and an extremely important piece. And when she got hurt, it sucked, but we all knew that we all had to step up and do our parts so we could still be a great team even without Julia.
You and Noemie led the way for Cathedral Catholic. What can you say about Noemie and her leadership as she's going to Oregon?
Noemie's awesome. She's such a good spirit on the court. She's super encouraging, and she always pushes me to my best. And playing with her has just been a great honor, and she's made me so much better, like blocking her in practice every day. It's just improved my game immensely.
And then Milan also chipped in 9 kills. What can you say about Milan and how she was able to step up?
Milan, she's amazing. She's like the loudest, most cheerful person. She always gives us these inspirational talks, and that really helps before the games. And she just pushes me to be the best player I am, and she's just a great leader on the court.
You are a junior, right?
Yes.
So obviously you're going to enjoy this win now, just let it soak in, but are there any plans for a possible repeat next season, or what's it going to be like going into next year?
That's our hope. I'm going to be a senior going into next year, so I'm going to have to take a bigger leadership role on the team and help lead the team. And hopefully we'll make it back here on the stage. It was amazing.
So that was my post-game interview with Jenna Haynes, the middle blocker for Cathedral Catholic. I actually was going to interview the head coach, Juliana Kahn, but she was with family, and she had her kid with her. It looks like the kid was like a month. The kid was not too old. I think it was like 1 year old at tops. But I basically told her that it was quite impressive that her team didn't only dropped 1 set all season, and that had not been achieved since Lake Travis of Austin did that in 2011. They had won 122 straight sets in a row, and then they dropped the first set of the season in the state semifinals, which was the second to last match of the season. But then they won the next 2, and then they swept their state final championship, and they went, I think it was like 50-0, and then again, they only lost 1 set, and then they won basically the rest of the sets. So for Cathedral Catholic to accomplish that feat is amazing. I know I don't want to use this in the incorrect terms, but I know they have a little bit of an advantage just because private school and they have transfers, but I don't care. It's like, look at the other teams that are private schools. Look at Sierra Canyon. They have a freaking all-star team. Look at Mater Dei and all the past they've had. Though I wouldn't say their players are like transfers, but I digress on that. It is what it is. I'm not going to get into that topic just because I don't want to open up a can of worms, but I digress on the whole private school versus public school thing. Anyway, so back to Cathedral Catholic. So it is very impressive that Cathedral Catholic still went undefeated. They hadn't dropped a set in a whole while, up into the week where they lost the set to Mira Costa. It was very impressive that they kept up that consistency. It's like, for them to do that is very impressive. I also caught up with Cathedral Catholic standout player Noemie Glover, who is going to Oregon after this season. So here's my post-game interview with Noemie Glover, future Oregon star and Cathedral Catholic beast. All right, Noemie, your team was able to win the CIF State Open Division Championship, and you went undefeated, and you only dropped 1 set all year. How big is this moment for you being a senior?
It's the biggest for me. I think at the beginning of this year, the beginning of last year, at the end of last year, when we lost that regional game, we were just so upset, and we kind of used that as motivation throughout the whole season, every practice, every time that we came on the court, just to play hard and play for our team and play for all our seniors. So I think that we did that to the fullest extent, and I'm so happy and I'm so proud of everyone on our team, and I'm so excited.
Now, did you predict the team to winning 97 straight sets, and how were you all able to keep consistent the whole season?
I think it really started in our practices. Having such a deep team, we were able to have really, really high level practices every single time that we stepped into the gym. So that kind of over prepared us for a lot of our opponents that we would play. So then we were kind of just go with the flow, and even the people that we played in our practices, we played amazing people, just having so many people on our team. So that kind of just carried on to our games, and we were able to stay strong and just play hard through anything.
Now, Julia, a couple weeks ago, she goes out with an ankle injury. How much momentum did you lose from her injury, and how were you all able to gain it back going into the state playoffs?
We definitely lost a lot of momentum with her being one of our best hitters and best all-around players on the team. And I think that we really use that as like a challenge to kind of come forward and still be able to hold like our place and our, I don't really know the word, but holds up such high standards. And we knew that the girls who were coming in were able to like compete at the same level and do what they needed to do to kind of fill her place. And she knew even that we were able to still be very strong without her, and we were able to play for her.
Mm-hmm. And then these past two games, you've had to step up your game. Like, how much of you being a senior, how much pressure was it on you, and how were you able to rise above the pressure without Julia?
I think, I don't know, I just kind of let it fly, like, do your thing. For me, I was able to, just come up and swing a few balls like I know I could. Playing strong, playing hard, knowing that your team is counting on you to make some of those big plays, and really feeding off the energy of the one big play, one big kill can really change the pace of a match. So just kind of feeding off of that, and that was able to push us for the rest of the season.
And then you also got contributions from Jenna as well as Milan. What can you say about those two as they were able to help take some of the load off you?
Jenna coming in, first year junior, seeing her for the first time in practice, I was just like amazed by her ability as a middle. So I was so happy that she was able to kind of come up as an underclassman and be strong for us. And then Milan, of course, I played with her during club as well. I've been with her since freshman year. I know that she's such an amazing player, and like she's like one of my best friends as well. So it's really fun seeing her play well and compete at the high level with me.
And then you're heading off to Oregon next season to play with the Ducks. What is it going to be like playing with Oregon, and what kind of player are they getting come next season?
I'm so excited, like beyond excited to be able to play at such a high level and being in college. I'm really excited. I know I'm going to have a challenge, but I love the challenge of being on a small freshman on a really high level team. So I'm just really excited to see what they have to offer and excited to be a part of that.
St. Francis was led by Taylor Williams, who had 13 kills, while Erin Curtis chipped in 10 kills of her own. Also, Havana Heft added 3 kills, and Sacha Tuma added 3 kills. So, for Cathedral Catholic, again, they're losing 10 seniors, including the amazing leader in Julia Blyashov, but they have a good amount of players returning for next season. They returned their libero, they returned their setter, and then the middle returns. And Cathedral Catholic, I think, is not going to go anywhere. It may not have the same feel as this year's team, but they're certainly not going to be anywhere. They're probably not going to They're not going to give up their crown just yet, just because they won the San Diego Section Championship, which is never really easy considering you've got Torrey Pines and Cathedral Catholic as well. But for Torrey Pines and La Costa Canyon, but for Cathedral Catholic, I think this is going to be a little bit of a year of them not rebuilding. It's just going to be a reload year, and I feel that Cathedral Catholic is still going to be one of the top teams in California next year. But they've got some stiff competition, but I'm not going to look that far ahead. As for St. Francis, again, it's a tough way for them to lose. They gave it their all in that third set. Obviously, having your first loss at this point of the season is bad. It's very heartbreaking. But for them, there's no shame in losing to a very talented and stacked team that is Cathedral Catholic. Remember, this is a Cathedral Catholic team that lost in the CIF SoCal Regional Finals last year to Marymount, who also went undefeated. They went 40-0, and I want to say they only lost like 10 or so sets, maybe even fewer than that. So for St. Francis, they have nothing to feel bad about. For the seniors, they obviously performed well, and they helped bring home a Northern California section championship to St. Francis. They even beat Archbishop Mitty, I want to say it's like 4 times. And that's not an easy team to beat because Archbishop Mitty was currently is the juggernaut in terms of CIF NorCal women or NorCal girls volleyball. So for St. Francis to beat a team 4 times in one season, they say it's tough to beat a team 3 times in one season. Well, for St. Francis, beating a team 4 times in one season is never easy. But overall, I just think that it's very impressive, and I really think that St. Francis has nothing to be down about, and their future looks bright, and Whitney Wallace is a beast of a libero, and I love the whole little storyline of Whitney Wallace playing her dad, John Wallace, who is the head coach of Archbishop Mitty. So overall, that's going to basically do it for some high school girls volleyball talk. Let's jump on a little into some NCAA women's volleyball week 13. So we had a lot happen this past week, as we had quite a number of top matches. Before I get on into the upsets that happened and my team of the week and all the other stat stuffers, I will say this about some of the teams that were on upset alert. Some of these teams actually got challenged. Let's start with San Diego. San Diego actually had to grind it out in 5 over LMU. So for me, this was no surprise. Loyola Marymount is a very good team. They pushed San Diego to 5 the first time around when the two teams played at Jenny Craig Pavilion. The match this time, the second go around, the match was played at LMU. And for me, I had a feeling Loyola Marymount was going to push them, just because the last time San Diego swept LMU at LMU, 2017. So basically, we've either seen LMU and San Diego at least go 4, or we've seen LMU just upset them. So this time around, San Diego was down 1-2 in sets, but then they won the 4th set, and then they escaped with the 5th set. And you got to give it up for LMU. I think that team could make the NCAA tournament. They have 2 very close losses to San Diego, the number 2 team in the nation, mind you. They played BYU tough, only lost in 4 sets. They have 2 wins over Pepperdine, which has some quality wins. So I think LMU could be a possible, I wouldn't say bid stealer, but I think they've earned their spot in the NCAA tournament. And it's not easy for LMU to get into the NCAA tournament. Yes, they are receiving votes in the most recent coaches polls, but you also got to remember, LMU is in a non-Power 5 conference. West Coast Conference is non-Power 5. So for LMU, they're going to have to make a strong case of they deserve to be in the NCAA tournament. And I think they have. I think their body of work definitely shows it. They just don't have the big breakout win, but I feel that they're good enough to be in the NCAA tournament. And who knows what they could bring. Remember, this is a team that upset Stanford in the round of 32, I think, a while back. I think it was like 8 seasons ago they upset them. That was back when Sarah Sponsel was on the team. And now Sarah Sponsel is playing some beach volleyball in the AVP. So jumping over from the West Coast Conference to the Pac-12, we had UCLA pushing Oregon to 5 sets, but there was no doubt in my mind Oregon would pull off the win. Just because Oregon is a very good team. I'm not surprised that UCLA is pushed them to 5, just because UCLA, they kind of have a little bit to play for. They don't have the big standout win. I mean, their best win is kind of against Utah, maybe Hawaii, but UCLA just doesn't have that big breakout win. UCLA is nowhere near the team that they were last year. And then yesterday, USC and Oregon took on one another. USC actually went up 2-0 in the match, and I'm thinking, well, this is no surprise. USC is a very talented team. Skylar Fields is playing. Mia Tuaniga is a beast of a setter, and they have some good playmakers all around. So I'm thinking, all right, so all USC needs to do is just close this puppy out, and then they're a shoo-in. Keep in mind that they were playing at Matthew Knight Arena in Oregon, and let me just tell you, Oregon has not lost a home game all season. So if USC were to become the first team to do so, to beat Oregon at Oregon, that would be huge for them. Unfortunately, they lost the 3rd set. They're actually up 19-18, and then they conceded a 7-1 run, and I'm like, oh God. I'm just thinking, okay, please don't let this be like Stanford. Because personally, I am a USC guy, but I try to be as fair as possible. But then USC found themselves down 10-5, and it's like, uh-oh. And then they eventually Oregon won the 4th set, 25-20, and they have to play 5. And then the 5th set, USC jumped out to a 6-4 lead, and it's looking good for the Trojans, right? No. They gave up the next 4 points to fall behind 8-6 at the side change, and then they gave up the next 2 points, which was basically in a 6-0 run, which turned their 6-4 deficit into a 10-6 deficit, and I'm just thinking, oh, come on, USC. I'm just wondering, why is USC doing this? And it was actually a 6-1 run. USC did eventually tie it up at 10 apiece in the fifth set, but then they gave up a 3-1 run to Oregon as they fell behind 13-11, and eventually USC lost the fifth set 15-12, and it's like, how? How does USC do this? It's like, I'm just thinking, please don't be another Stanford loss like it was last year, or not last year, last week. And unfortunately, they got reverse swept. And I'm just thinking, I thought we were over reverse sweeps in the Pac-12. So it's like, one thing I did mention on Twitter, USC has got to learn to close out matches, and they have to learn to not concede scoring runs. It's like, it was one thing with Stanford just because they came oh so close to beating them, and Stanford is a very good team. But against Oregon, okay, I understand it's on the road, but I still can't, I can't defend that. It's like, you got reverse swept once. You should learn from your mistakes. You have talent on your team. You had Oregon's gym practically quiet after that second set. And then you basically gave them the momentum. And you had them on the ropes in that third set. You were up 19-18, and then you conceded a 7-1 run. It's like, you can't do that against an actual NCAA team, NCAA tournament team, just because USC has talent, but I don't know if they're deep enough to go into the end. They're not going to go as, they'll probably be as deep, they'll go as far as the Sweet 16. They'll go as far as Skylar Fields takes them. Skylar Fields is a talent unmatched. I really think she is one of the best hitters in NCAA women's volleyball as of right now. However, she can only do so much. Like, USC kind of has to mix it up. Jordan Wilson, she got involved as well, and then they also have to get their middles involved. I just really felt dumbfounded that they conceded a 2-0 lead, and it's like, really? And here's the weird thing. USC hit 359 for the match. Skylar Fields had 27 kills. She hit 357. Jordan Wilson had 15 kills. She hit 355. Emilia Vesca, who's another player to watch for in terms of the Trojans' offense, she hit 462. She had 15 kills. Lindsay Miller had 8 kills in the middle. She hit 312. And USC lost. There was not a set outside of set 5 where they hit under 300. And the Trojans lost to Oregon. It makes no sense. I just couldn't believe that USC just lost that. With that offensive output, they could beat anybody. But against Oregon, I get it. Oregon's a very good team. But for them to lose, this could have been a huge win. This could have been a statement win. In addition, this win could have given Stanford the outright Pac-12 crown, which is going to have to wait a little bit. But this could have been huge for USC, but unfortunately, they wound up falling flat on their face, and it's like, you can't do that against a team like that, because if USC can't beat Oregon, then I don't see how they're going to get past some of the better teams. I mean, USC is a good team. Brad Keller's done an outstanding job. This has been a much better season than it was last year. It's not going to be like the previous year. And they did beat Oregon the first time at Galen Center. But you're going to have to win on the road in hostile environments if you want to go deep into the NCAA tournament. Just because USC, they're not getting a top 16 seed. They're for sure not a top 4 seed, and they're not going to be a top 8 seed. I'm sorry, but USC is going to have to learn to win on the road, and they're going to have to learn to close out matches and not concede scoring runs. Just because USC could be a dark horse in the NCAA tournament, but I just don't see them going farther than the Sweet 16. I think they could win a couple, but again, they go as far as Skylar Fields can take them. Anyway, so Larry, I'm sorry to Larry B, who's in the live chat room. He said fight on, but then I had to mention that USC got reverse swept, and what's worse is that they were coming off of a sweep over Oregon State. Now, Oregon State's not really the best team to come off of to get momentum off of, but they had confidence going into the Sunday matchup against Oregon. So for USC, it's back to the drawing board for them, just because I feel they have potential, but unfortunately, they fell flat on their face. And then also, I'm just going to briefly talk about this one. UC Santa Barbara lost to UC Davis, I think, on Thursday. I think it was like Thursday or Friday. It was Thursday. But either way, UC Santa Barbara cost themselves the Big West Conference Championship. They now find themselves 2 games back of Hawaii. Had they not lost to Davis, they still would be a game behind Hawaii going into this week of the Big West Conference. But unfortunately, Hawaii is now very close to winning the Big West Conference title. Now, Santa Barbara has obviously had an up and down scene. Their non-conference schedule was pretty tough, but they did so great in in conference play, especially at home. Here's the thing about UC Santa Barbara. They have not lost a home game. That's the good thing. The bad thing is they're 8-7 on the road. You're not gonna win. You're not gonna go deep into any NCAA tournament, let alone you're not gonna win any NCAA. You're not gonna get invited to any NCAA tournament if you're 8-7 on the road. You have to win on the road. Now, granted, there have been some tough opponents for UC Santa Barbara, but when it comes to conference play, you have to be prepared to win on the road. They did so great against UC Irvine in their second conference match, as well as UC San Diego, but then again, San Diego's not really the best team, but the Big West Conference was a big anomaly, so I digress. But some of the matches that Santa Barbara struggled in, they struggled against Long Beach State, which they have not won there in 10 years. They struggled against Hawaii, which is acceptable. They swept Cal Poly, which was very impressive, but they lose to Davis. Now, you're probably wondering, well, how good is UC Davis? They have to be that good, right? Well, let me just tell you where they're at in the Big West Conference standings, ladies and gentlemen. They're in the middle of the pack. UC Davis is 9-9 in conference play and 14-14. They are nowhere near conference title contention. So for Santa Barbara to lose that one in 5, it's deflating. Now, in Santa Barbara's defense, the third set was 40-38 in favor of Davis. It was that long of a set, and for them to lose that was kind of deflating, but they bounced back well in that fourth set. But this is why you have to do well on the road, because if you're not doing well on the road, you're going to be at the mercy of all of your Big West opponents. It does not matter how good you are in terms of your non-conference schedule. It does not matter how bad you are. It does not matter what players you have. If you're not winning on the road in the Big West Conference, you are not going to actually contend with the likes of Hawaii or Cal Poly. I'm just saying. I know Santa Barbara swept the season series against Cal Poly, but losing to Davis has really hurt them. And they lost to Davis last year, they lost to Davis last year. They didn't lose at Davis, but they lost to UC Davis last year. That wound up costing them the Big West Conference crown, just because they beat Hawaii both times last year, but then they also lost to Cal Poly and they lost to Long Beach State on the road. So you basically have to win on the road. Like, you can be the best home team out there just because the Thunderdome is such an advantage. However, when it comes to playing on the road, if you're not winning on the road, you are not proving yourself. That's my little thing right there. Just because winning on the road proves that you could contend in hostile environments. And unfortunately for UC Santa Barbara, they did not contend in a hostile environment. Again, UC Davis had literally nothing to lose in that game. They knew they weren't going to win the Big West Conference. They knew they weren't going to go to no NCAA tournament. They basically were playing with house money, and they cashed in with the win over Santa Barbara. So, unfortunately for Santa Barbara, they're going to need to have a lot go their way. They're going to have to beat Hawaii, and then they're going to have to... first, Santa Barbara plays Cal State Northridge tomorrow. As of this recording, this is being recorded on Monday, November 21st, as the CSUN Santa Barbara matchup is actually going to be on November 22nd, a Tuesday. And then, in addition, they're going to have to beat CSUN. They're going to have to beat Hawaii, and then Santa Barbara also has to hope that Hawaii loses to Cal State Northridge. Which, if you're wondering how good Northridge is, they are second to last in the Big West Conference standings. They're 4-14 and they're 9-21 overall. So, unless Hawaii has plans of resting their starters, well, here's the thing. Hawaii obviously plays Santa Barbara, and I expect that to be a barn burner, just because playing Santa Barbara at Santa Barbara is going to be tough. But Hawaii is basically, Hawaii controls their own destiny. Santa Barbara needs a lot to happen in order for Santa Barbara to clinch at least a share of the Big West Conference title. And even if that were to happen, I don't even know if they get in, but I'm sure they'll get in, just because one time the Big West Conference had tri-conference champions with CSUN, Santa Barbara, and Hawaii back in 2013. So it's possible that both Santa Barbara and Hawaii would both get into the NCAA tournament. But again, in order for Santa Barbara to clinch a share of the Big West Conference championship, CSUN has to beat Hawaii the day after Santa Barbara has to beat Hawaii. So the odds are not in Santa Barbara's favor, and Santa Barbara does not have the RPI to be an at-large. And again, they don't have too many standout victories. Even if they were to beat Hawaii, that's not really the biggest standout-ish victory out there. They have played some stiff competition, but unfortunately, it does not get complimented due to the fact that most of those matches they lost, and I think they lost in straight sets. So for Santa Barbara, their NCAA tournament hopes lie on a thread. They're basically going to have to hope for everything to go their way. And it sucks because Santa Barbara really turned the corner when they played in conference play. They went undefeated at home up until this point. Like, we don't know if they'll go undefeated at home, but it's disappointing just because I thought Santa Barbara was going to turn the corner and prove themselves that they can contend in the Big West Conference with the likes of Hawaii. Unfortunately, Santa Barbara just fell apart, and I feel they might have looked ahead. Though it's tough to look ahead when you have UC Davis, then UC Riverside, which UC Santa Barbara swept. Then you've got CSUN on a Tuesday night, which is a funky matchup. And then you've got the Friday matchup against Hawaii, which is big time right there. So for Santa Barbara, that's pretty much all I have to say about them. Now we got to jump on into the upsets. So for the upsets, we had, first of all, my team of the week this week is Rice. So Rice managed to defeat Western Kentucky in the Conference USA Finals, as they actually beat them in 5. Prior to that, Rice actually lost the past 5 matchups, which dated all the way back to 2019. So I imagine that had to have been heartbreaking for the Owls, as I think a majority of those losses were in 5 sets. But this time, Rice used the reverse card, and they beat Western Kentucky 22-25, 25-22, 22-25, 28-26, and 15-11. Rice came up clutch. They were amazing in that Conference USA Tournament Championship match. So they are my team of the week. I had to go back and forth with them as well as a couple others. Before I get into the upsets, I know most of y'all want to hear the upsets. We have to look at the automatic qualifiers. So in terms of the automatic qualifiers, the ones that have punched their ticket into the NCAA tournament are UMBC, Loyola of Chicago, Florida Gulf Coast, Texas, High Point, Towson, Rice, Wright State, Yale, Quinnipiac, Delaware State, Missouri Valley, Farley Dickinson, Tennessee State, Colgate, Southeastern Louisiana, Samford, Florida A&M, James Madison, San Diego, or USD, and Stephen F. Austin. Those are 20 out of 32 automatic qualifiers clinched. There are 12 automatic qualifiers remaining, as the American Conference, ACC, Big Sky, Big Ten, Big West, Mid-American, Missouri Valley, Mountain West, Pac-12, Colgate are basically still deciding a conference champion. And honestly, most of the conference championships have been decided. For example, Pac-12, it's basically down to Stanford. All Stanford needs to do is beat Oregon State, and then they beat Cal. If they win at least one more match, Stanford is the outright Pac-12 champion. If Stanford loses and Oregon wins out, then Oregon having the tiebreaker over them gets the automatic qualifier. And if that happens, then Stanford rightfully does not deserve to win the Pac-12 championship. They would be the not the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Indianapolis Colts of last season, except Stanford's in the NCAA tournament. All right, jumping on over into the upsets. So this past Friday, we had Ohio State falling to Maryland. So I was very surprised that Ohio State lost this one, as Ohio State was led by Gabby Gonzalez, who had 15 kills, Janasia Moore had 13 kills, and Emily Londot had 10 kills. Riley Rader chipped in 8 kills. As Ohio State only hit 155, Maryland was led by Sam Sire, who had 22 kills. She was the only player on Maryland to have double-digit kills. And here's the crazy thing. Maryland got outdug 80-57. But that's not... Okay, but that's just the least of Ohio State's problems. I don't understand how Ohio State outdug Maryland, but they lost. But now looking at it, Maryland outblocked Ohio State. Ohio State had a grand total of 9 blocks as a team, while Maryland as a whole team, they had a grand total of, if I'm doing my math correctly, 17.5. Yeah, Maryland is not winning any, or Ohio State's not going to win any matches if they're outblocked 17.5 to 9. They also had 2 service aces, though they only missed 2 serves. And Maryland only hit 226. So for Ohio State, they lost in 4 sets. They won the first set 25-16. I thought this was going to be a comfortable match for Ohio State, but then they got pretty much thumped throughout the rest of the match. 25-15 in set 2, 25-18 in set 3, and 25-18 in set 4. Big yikes for Ohio State. And Maryland, they're kind of playing with a little bit of a purpose, just because that win did put them one game above 500. They actually lost to Michigan the day after. So for Maryland, unfortunately, their last 2 games are against Indiana and... Oh, I'm blanking on the last one. I think it's Purdue. Yes, it was Purdue. So Maryland and Purdue, and then Maryland and Indiana. And speaking of Indiana, speak of the devil, jumping on over to Sunday, Indiana managed to beat Ohio State in 5 sets on Sunday, as Indiana was led by Maddie Saris, who had 14 kills, but she had 11 hitting errors, while Candela Alonso Corcelis had 14 kills. Kaylee Ramelsberg had 10 kills. As a team, Indiana hit 202. They had 14 blocks to Ohio State's 12. They had 90 digs to Ohio State's 79. They had 12 service aces. 12 service aces. Ohio State gave up 12 service aces while only having 4. The only thing I'll give Indiana is that they missed 14 serves. But to have 12 service aces, that's impressive. That's a better ratio than most people expected. And in the defense of Ohio State, they lost the 5th set 16-14. Indiana dropped the first set 26-24, won the next 2 sets by scores of 25-17, and then Ohio State won the 4th set 25-20, and then the 5th set Indiana won 16-14. Ohio State was led by Gabby Gonzalez, who had 14 kills. Janasia Moore had 12 kills. Emily Londot had 11 kills. Riley Rader added 10 kills. I'm surprised Ohio State lost with that balanced effort. I really don't understand what happened with Ohio State. Here's the thing. What boggles my mind is that Ohio State beat Purdue on the road, and Purdue is a good team, and they also beat Nebraska at the Covelli Center, but then they lost to Indiana at Covelli, and then they lost to Maryland at College Park. I thought Ohio State was tied for first in the Big Ten Conference, but unfortunately for them, they kind of cost them the Big Ten Conference championship, which is very bad for them. That's just an unacceptable loss. And the worst part is that now Ohio State has to hope that Wisconsin loses their next 2 games against Nebraska and Ohio State. And then Nebraska has to lose on the last day of the season against Minnesota to forge a 3-way tie in the Big Ten Conference. But here's the thing. Wisconsin barely got past Penn State this past Saturday, as Wisconsin needed 5 to beat the Nittany Lions at Rec Hall. Oh, and I guess I should also mention that Wisconsin beat Rutgers, but that was kind of a given. So Wisconsin kind of has started their gauntlet with a little bit of a shaky start, but they're still on top of the Big Ten Conference. Well, Nebraska has been taking care of business every day in every way. So for Wisconsin, all they just need to do is win one more match. If they beat Nebraska this week, they're outright Big Ten Conference champions. But that is going to be at the Bob. It's going to be in Lincoln, Nebraska. So for Wisconsin, they've got themselves a very tough road ahead of them, just because it's never easy winning in Nebraska, except for Stanford. But I digress. But for Ohio State, they cost themselves a top 4 seed. Had they beaten Wisconsin, and had they not had these losses, they still would have been tied atop with Wisconsin, and they would have controlled their own destiny. Now they don't control their own destiny, and Ohio State basically has to hope that they win out, and then they have to hope that Wisconsin loses out, and then they have to hope that Nebraska splits this week, as they would have to beat Wisconsin on Friday, and then they have to lose to Minnesota. So Ohio State kind of dug their own grave. I'm sorry to say, but it's true. Speaking of Minnesota and Penn State actually upset Minnesota on Friday in Rec Hall in Penn State. So for Minnesota, I had a feeling they weren't going to win the Big Ten this year, just because their loss to Northwestern really sunk their ship. And Minnesota has been very suspect ever since they lost to Pepperdine in their own tournament. So for Penn State, they were led by Kashana Williams, who had 20 kills, while Alexa Markley had 11 kills, Zoe Wetherington chipped in 10 kills, and Katie Clark had 9 kills. As a team, Penn State hit an impressive 273, and they won in 4 sets, 25-18, 25-18, 20-25, and 27-25. Fortunately, Penn State was able to escape that 4th set and not allow a 5th set, as Penn State also outdug Minnesota 57-48. That's not going to get the job done. I will give Minnesota this. They outblocked Penn State 14-12, but Penn State outaced them 7-4. Minnesota was held to only a hitting percentage of .211, as they were led by Taylor Landfair, who had 17 kills, while Jenna Wenas had 12 kills, and McKenna Wircher added 9 kills. So Minnesota, I had a feeling they weren't. I mean, Penn State's not a bad team. Let me just get that out of the way. Penn State is a very good team. Okay, not very good team, but they're better than what everyone labeled them as. Like, they came in with the labels of very young team, first-year head coach, following the departure of Russ Rose, and Katie Schumacher-Cawley has done an outstanding job as head coach. I really think that Penn State is going to be on the up and up, not this year, but next year. So, for Penn State, they definitely have something to play for, and the fact that they almost beat Wisconsin does speak to high volumes of how tough this conference is. The Big Ten is basically volleyball country. I don't care what anyone says. Big Ten is volleyball country. Fight me over it. Anyway, jumping on over to the SEC. So this was the day after Florida beat Kentucky, as Florida actually swept Kentucky, but this time around, Kentucky pulled out the reverse card, and they swept Florida 25-23, 26-24, 25-17, as this was played in Gainesville, Florida. So here's the thing about Florida and Kentucky. They're both tied atop the SEC standings with 2 matches to go. Florida heads on down to Ole Miss to play the Rebels, while Kentucky returns home to Kentucky to take on South Carolina. For Kentucky, in this matchup, they were led by Adana Rollins, Azani Teeler, and Aaron Lamb, who had 11 kills apiece. As a team, Kentucky hit 267. In terms of digs, they were outdug 44-34, and but Kentucky made up for that category as they outblocked Florida 12-7. I was very impressed with how Kentucky was able to sweep Florida at Florida, especially coming off of a sweep of their own after getting swept previously against Florida. Florida was led by Merritt Beeson, who had 12 kills, while Marina Markova had 9 kills. She did have 8 hitting errors, and that was big for Kentucky. They needed to slow down Marina Markova just because she is a very talented player, and the fact that she unfortunately did not have the best night kind of speaks to high volumes of her night in general. The thing about Florida was that they had 11 kills in the third set, but they also had 11 hitting errors. You can't win a match and expect to have with 11 hitting errors. It just will not work that way. And unfortunately, it just doesn't. So for Florida, this was kind of a costly loss just because now they'll most likely have to share the SEC crown with Kentucky, unless, of course, Kentucky slips up. If Kentucky somehow loses along the way, which is possible just because the SEC is very unpredictable, then Florida would get the outright conference championship. However, if Florida loses to Ole Miss, then Kentucky will be dancing into the night. Here's the thing about South Carolina and Ole Miss. Those two are actually really close with one another, and believe it or not, South Carolina actually has to play Auburn earlier in the week. They have to play them on Wednesday, then they have to play on Friday and on Saturday, just because Saturday is the last day of the NCAA Women's Volleyball regular season. And South Carolina, here's the thing. If South Carolina wins out, they have a possibility of making the NCAA tournament. But South Carolina is going to need a lot to happen in order for them to get in. And then Ole Miss is playing with house money. Ole Miss is they're not going to be 500. They don't have the wins to make the NCAA tournament. So Ole Miss has nothing left to lose. They're playing at home. They're going to honor their seniors. And that's when a team is very dangerous. So for me, I think that we could be seeing Kentucky and Florida battling it out against Ole Miss and South Carolina. But more on that later. So that's going to do it for all the upsets that happen. We're actually going to take a quick little commercial break. When we come back, we have to go over the stat stuffers and some NCAA women's volleyball news. Then we have to get into the AVCA Top 25. And then we have the last week of the NCAA women's volleyball season and their noteworthy matches for this week. So keep it locked here. You are listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all the sports. We'll be right back after this.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Harrison Glazer, and we're coming at you from the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. I cover the Jets, the Islanders, the Nets, and the Yankees.
This is Pierre Moss, and I cover the Mets, Knicks, Rangers, and the Giants.
Our show is live every Wednesday through Spreaker and a bunch of other ways to get our content. Again, we're the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. We talk about all those New York sports. It's a lot of fun. We get into all of it. Please tune in. Again, that's Wednesdays at 6 p.m.
And we look forward to having you guys right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hello, ladies and sinners. Hello, sports fans around the world. Hello, IE Sports family. This is Cale Henderson, the host of IE Vegas, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio. If you folks are interested in sports in the Vegas area, if you're wanting to have a blast for 1 hour, every Tuesday night from 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, this is a show built for the Vegas sports fans, where we feature the Las Vegas Raiders, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the Las Vegas Aces, and the University of Las Vegas, Nevada Rebels. Hopefully, fingers crossed, MLB team coming soon. Either way, if you folks are looking to have a blast for 1 hour each and every week, tune in Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you folks are interested in Vegas sports news, go to our Twitter, at SinCities_IESR, and you can speak with me, the host, Cale Henderson, at Cale_Henderson on Twitter. At any time, be happy to reply. Always willing to reach out to our fans. Again, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
That's right, everybody. Definitely check out all of our amazing shows on IE Sports Radio, as we are back with Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. Definitely check out Sin City Sports with Cale Henderson. Cale does an awesome job breaking down all things Las Vegas sports. He even talks a little Las Vegas Ramblers of the NBA. The show goes live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Pacific Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. Definitely check out Cale. Also check out Harrison Glazer and Pierre Moss every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific Time, 8 p.m. Eastern with the show that never sleeps. They do a great job of breaking down all things New Jersey and New York sports. And with that being said, let's get on into segment number 2 of Set Point. So before we head on into the AVCA Coaches Poll, I got to go over the stat stuffers and notables for this week. So I failed to mention this last week, and I feel so bad for this girl. Emily Londot surpassed 1,000 kills for Ohio State. I don't know if I mentioned that last week, and I definitely did not mention that last week just because I didn't put that down in my notes. I forgot to mention it, but she surpassed 1,000 kills for Ohio State, so good job to Emily Londot. She is a fantastic player at Ohio State, and this was 2 weekends ago. This wasn't last weekend, but the weekend before, so great job to Emily Londot. She came up big against Nebraska, which was very impressive. Now for this past weekend, we had Eleanor Holthaus, who holds the record for most matches played at Iowa State. So congratulations to Eleanor. Andrea Svetanova of Coppin State actually tied the NCAA women's volleyball record for most service aces in the modern-day scoring era with 15. 15 aces in one match in this era. That is darn right impressive. So congratulations to Andrea of Coppin State. And then we have Angela Grieve of Miami surpassing 1,000 kills this past weekend. Elena Oglev became the 19th player in Stanford history to surpass 1,000 digs this past weekend. Then Soleil Thomas surpassed 1,000 kills for Iowa State. So Iowa State's been making history from their players. Jazz Schmidt also surpassed 1,000 kills this past weekend for Creighton, which was big time right there. Unfortunately, Creighton did lose to Marquette, which was a big time loss. But more on that later. Carrington Jones moved into 8th all-time in all-time blocks at Texas Tech this past weekend, which was big time right there. Maddie McKissock surpassed 5,000 assists this past weekend for UCLA, though most of her assists came when she was back at Georgia Tech. But regardless, her surpassing 5,000 assists is quite impressive. Then finally, we have Annie Benbow becoming the all-time dig leader at University of San Diego, surpassing Hunter Jennings. I'm kidding. I knew who the all-time dig leader was. Back in my day, I actually did watch a little bit of San Diego volleyball. But Annie Benbow surpassed Hunter Jennings as the all-time dig leader, who has 1,490 digs and counting for the Toreros. And Benbow has just had an outstanding year, and she is hoping to guide the Toreros into the correct direction. So that is that for the stat stuffers and notables from this past week. Before I get into the AVCA Coaches Poll, and I know y'all are probably chomping at the bits, you're probably wondering, get on into it. I do have some volleyball news, and unfortunately it's not good. It comes from the SEC, as unfortunately for Texas A&M, they have released the coaching duties of their head coach, Coach Bird, which I'm sorry, but that's just an awesome nickname, Coach Bird. That is outstanding, and If I had a name like that, that would have been awesome. But unfortunately for Texas A&M, they have relieved Laura Kuhn, a.k.a. Bird, of her coaching duties. Now, this is kind of not surprising. For those of you that don't know, Texas A&M actually doesn't not have any matches to play this week. Apparently their bye is on the last week of the NCAA women's volleyball season, which is a weird thing just because Texas A&M is kind of But for Laura Kuhn, she was a fantastic coach. I remember 2009 season where the Aggies went all the way to the Sweet 16, only to run into a little team by the name of Wisconsin, which eventually wound up making the NCAA Tournament championship. But for Texas A&M, this was a team that just could not live up to expectations after 2019. 2020, the COVID year, they just fell apart. Like, I remember going on a mega rant on them and how they lost to Mississippi State, which didn't even have a loss coming in. They lost to Mississippi State twice, which they didn't have a loss coming in. And then they lost to their rival, Arkansas. And I know Texas A&M had a win over Western Kentucky, and they also beat Kentucky. But unfortunately, here's what the record for Texas A&M was. So Texas A&M's record, get this everybody, hold on. Guys, listen. So Texas A&M's record is 13-16, but their conference record is a whopping 5-13. 5-13 in the SEC. You are not going to have a whole lot of success with just the 5-13 record. And last year, I understand Texas A&M was very young, and I totally get it, but last year, Texas A&M was 7-11, which is, ugh. And then the year before, they were 9-9. So you're starting to look at a trend here. After 2019 season, where the Aggies went a whopping 13-5 in conference play, that 13-5 decreased to 9-9, which eventually decreased to 7-11, which eventually decreased to 5-13. So, you know the old saying, winning cures everything? Well, losing does not make matters better. Losing is basically the tear gas on the little bit of fire that you're under. So, unfortunately for Laura Bird Kuhn, she unfortunately has gotten her walking papers, but she did an outstanding job during her, I wouldn't say outstanding job, but she did a good job during the 2019 season. But unfortunately for her, it's a tough industry. When you're not winning, you're basically not doing yourself any favor. And you have to look at that 13-6 record very closely. That 13-6 record came from 8 non-conference wins and 3 non-conference losses. Granted, the non-conference losses came against San Diego and Pitt, both really good teams, and then they lost to Indiana, which has some sort of like postseason aspirations if they can get past Penn State and Maryland, but don't hold your breath on that one. And again, Texas A&M does have a win over Western Kentucky, which I think is a good win. And then they also swept Kentucky in SEC play, which they became the first team since 2017 to sweep Kentucky. The first SEC team to sweep Kentucky since 2017. So there's that. Well, unfortunately, Texas A&M just could not do enough to keep Laura's job. And I hope she does find a new job elsewhere. But I wish her the best going forward. It sucks when you get your pink slip and you're basically gone. Well, your pink slip is basically you're quitting, but she was just relieved of all of her duties immediately. So she basically got the boot. So it's unfortunate, but you gotta survive and thrive in the SEC, just because it's a Power 5 conference for a reason, and it's a conference that's going to show you no mercy if you're not prepared. So that's that for NCAA women's volleyball news. Jumping on over to the AVCA women's volleyball coaches poll for this week. It's the last one of the regular season before we get on into NCAA tournament time. 25 through 21 consists of Washington State at 25, Washington at 24, UCF at 23, Houston at 22, and Western Kentucky at 21. 20 through 16 consists of Rice at 20, Purdue at 19, BYU at 18, Baylor at 17, and Kentucky at 16. 15 through 11 consists of Creighton at 15, Marquette at 14, Georgia Tech at 13, Florida at 12, and Penn State at 11. 10 through 6 consists of Oregon at 10, Minnesota at 9, Ohio State at 8, Pitt at 7, and Stanford at 6. 5 through 1 consists of Nebraska at 5, Louisville at 4, Wisconsin at 3, San Diego at 2, and your number one team, and still number one team in the AVCA coaches poll for November 21st, aka the last week of the regular season, is Texas. So, like I said, Texas already locked up the Big 12 conference. For Washington, this was an upset I didn't really want to include, but Washington did lose to Colorado in straight sets this past week. Now, here's the thing. Colorado is actually a pretty good team. They're not a bad team in any way, but I don't know if they'll make the NCAA tournament. I feel at best they're a last four team to get in. I don't know. I just, the only way Colorado probably wins is if they beat Utah this weekend, but I don't even think that guarantees them, just because Utah swept Washington as well. So for Washington, they kind of fell off the wagon. I know they lost Maddie Ensley to injury. That is big time right there, but you have other players to step up. So for Washington, it's going to be quite interesting to see what their fate beholds come the NCAA tournament. Some have them being the last four in, but they've been ranked the entire way. If they had not been ranked, and then they've now been ranked, but now they're about to be not ranked, but now they're ranked, I kind of would see that, but I feel that Washington, I think, is a lock to get in. I don't know if they're guaranteed to go deep. I don't think they can go really deep this season. Washington just doesn't have the dogs like they did last year when they almost upset Texas in the Sweet 16. But for Washington, I just feel that they just don't have it in them. I feel maybe they'll go as far as the Sweet 16, but they're kind of in the same boat as USC. They can only go as far as some of their big-time hitters without Maddie Ensley takes them. And then as we see, Rice is ahead of Western Kentucky, which is no surprise right there, just because Rice beat Western Kentucky when it truly matters, the Conference USA Championship. That's why I had them as Team of the Week. Kentucky kind of moved up to number 16, but I don't know. I feel they might be a top 16 team. Here's my biggest question. Is San Diego a top 4 team? So if you're a top 4 team, you basically get home court advantage all the way up to the regional finals. And then after that, you're into the Final Four where you're playing at one neutral site. Here's my thing. Is San Diego deserving of a top 4 seed? You have to wonder that, just because San Diego only has one loss, and that was to Louisville, which they actually beat Pitt this past season. They swept Pitt over the weekend, and they really socked it to him. I was very surprised Louisville just came out guns a-blazing. But then again, Louisville meant business on their home floor. The last time, Louisville lost in 5 to Pitt, but this time around, Louisville laid down the wood on the Panthers. Going back to San Diego, does San Diego deserve a top 4 seed? Most of their conference is kind of, what's the word? Not high in RPI. Now, this past weekend, they did get challenged by LMU and Pepperdine, which I really thought I knew that San Diego was going to get a challenge from those two. And LMU actually gets a boost in terms of RPI as well as Pepperdine in terms of playing San Diego. But back to San Diego, I don't know. This is going to be interesting to see if San Diego deserves a top 4 seed. Just because Texas is obviously going to get the 1 seed. Wisconsin still could be vying for a top 4 seed just because they're on the verge of winning the Big Ten. Louisville might have a top 4 seed locked up, barring they don't lose to Notre Dame. And then you've got Nebraska, which has played a pretty tough schedule, especially in Big Ten conference play. They could possibly swoop in and get that top 4 seed and knock San Diego outside of the top 4. And don't count out Stanford as well. Stanford is very high in RPI. Last week they were ranked 3rd in RPI, but here's the thing for Stanford. Playing teams like Oregon State and then Arizona and Arizona State, which they did last week. This week they have Oregon State and then they have Cal to close out the season. That's going to hurt your RPI. So it's going to be very interesting. And here's the thing. I am not good with bracketology. I don't do bracketology. I don't do projections of which NCAA team is going to be in or which team is going to be out. All I know is that anything could be possible with this week. Just because, circling the wagons back to San Diego, the Toreros have been playing great, but here's the thing. Are they deserving of a top 4 seed? That's my big question to you all. If you think they're deserving, awesome. I mean, they only have 1 loss on the season. They've played a pretty tough schedule. They've had some good quality wins, and they won their conference outright. But the West Coast Conference only has BYU and San Diego ranked. LMU is receiving votes, and Pepperdine also is receiving votes. But overall, I don't know. I think the West Coast Conference, with it not being a Power 5 conference, is kind of holding San Diego back. But you never know. We'll see what happens. I mean, it would be great if we saw San Diego as a top 4 seed. I think they could be a top 4 seed. I think they have the resume to be a top 4 seed. Though all of the conference wins that they swept against, ranging all the way back after they beat Pepperdine, all the way up to the match where they played before LMU, that kind of hinders them. Like, they've played teams like Portland, Gonzaga. BYU is kind of stiff competition, but they are not the same team as they were in the past. And then other teams that had some potential, but they just don't fit the bill of helping your RPI. But for San Diego, they play BYU tomorrow. I'll get into the matchups a little bit later, and I feel if they win that one in convincing fashion, I think the Toreros could, hence the word could, be a top 4 seed. And this is actually a perfect segue to get into the last topic of the night, being the matchups to watch for in Week 14. So we'll start off with the sneaky good matchups. San Diego at BYU. I put this in the sneaky good category just because San Diego already has the conference locked up. BYU, I mean, I guess they can improve their possible seeding. I mean, they could jump to a top 16 seed, which would have them hosting for a little bit, but not all the way up to the regionals. But for BYU, they don't have much to lose. They can't win the conference, but they could build some momentum going into the NCAA tournament. It's very tough to win at BYU. BYU is a very tough gymnasium to win at just because, well, higher altitude, raucous fan base. I think San Diego might have their hands full. I don't think it's going to be an easier match like it was the previous time. Because now San Diego is at BYU, and they struggled against LMU, and they had a little bit of trouble with Pepperdine to begin with. But now the big test is, can they beat BYU at BYU to cap off the undefeated conference championship season, regular season. So jumping on over to Wednesday, we actually have Penn State at Northwestern. So Penn State, they can't win the Big Ten Conference, but they can at least try to improve their seeding or make sure they don't slip down even further. For Northwestern, they are on the verge of making the NCAA tournament. They have that potential right there just because the Big Ten is very, very, very good. And let me just tell you, Northwestern has some quality wins this year. They beat Minnesota. I want to say I feel they have other wins as well. I think they also beat Purdue as well. And they have some decent wins. They also beat, I wouldn't say beating Indiana or Michigan State is big, but they beat Michigan this year, which I think is a kind of a big deal. They beat Michigan twice, which is very impressive. I really think, wait, hold on, everybody. Northwestern I'm looking at the wrong schedule. So Northwestern is 17-13. Northwestern did not beat Purdue twice or Michigan twice. They lost to them the first time around, but they did beat Minnesota, like I said, and they beat Purdue. They did beat Purdue, but outside of that, they haven't really beaten anyone too big. Like, they're 6-12 in Big Ten conference play. And most of those, obviously the Minnesota win is amazing. But they've beaten Rutgers, and they even lost to Maryland. They beat Rutgers twice. They avenged the loss against Maryland, and again, they beat Purdue, which is nice, and they beat Iowa, which is nice. But it's like, it's not going to be anything that they're going to ride home about. I think Northwestern could get into the NCAA tournament, but I don't know. Like, if Northwestern gets in, you're going to have to take Michigan. You're going to have to take Indiana, which they're clinging to a 500 record. They're going to have to take Illinois, which has been up and down. Purdue is probably a lock, but for the Big Ten, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Northwestern, and Maryland are all undecided. Maryland is also 500 as well, and they're playing Indiana this week as well, which, boy howdy, that's going to actually be, that actually has more implications than most people would think. But for Maryland, they play Purdue, and then also for Indiana, in addition to playing Maryland, they also play Illinois, which could be a win, but we'll see. But back to Penn State Northwestern. Northwestern could boost their resume of making the NCAA tournament if they win. If they don't win, if they don't make the NCAA tournament, they have nothing to be ashamed of. They beat Purdue and Minnesota, which is freaking amazing. But for Northwestern, a win over Penn State would be quite good. Jumping over to another Wednesday matchup to watch for is USC at number 24 Washington. So for the Trojans, okay, other than the Oregon win, where they won at Galen Center, this would be a big-time win just because they're playing Washington at Washington. This is their final chance to prove themselves on the road. They can't pull a Santa Barbara. They have to actually come up big. And for USC, I think they can beat Washington. I think USC can beat Washington. Washington was coming off of a shaky weekend where they did beat Utah but lost to Colorado. And then USC was so close to knocking off Oregon, but unfortunately they just had things go awry as the match went on. So for USC, this is kind of a nothing left to lose thing. And then also, I forgot to mention on Tuesday, we have UCLA at number 25, Washington State. So, for UCLA, they are a long shot to getting in. If they beat Washington State and they also beat USC, and that gets them into the tournament, I'll be surprised. They just don't have the wins to get into the NCAA tournament. Again, this UCLA team is not the same UCLA team that they had last season. I know they've come close to beating teams like Stanford, beating Oregon, beating Washington, but close doesn't really cut it. UCLA is kind of like the Chargers of volleyball. They're close to being good teams, but close only counts in so many certain aspects. I digress. So that's all the sneaky good matchups. We have a lot of notable and definitely noteworthy matchups. I'm just going to get this out of the way. I couldn't get every noteworthy matchup. I couldn't get all the conferences or conference tournaments. So if you see a matchup that you don't see on here, let me know in the comment section or just hit me up on Twitter and say, Set Point, you forgot this matchup. How could you forget that this big-time matchup is crucial for NCAA purposes? Anyway, to the notable matchups, starting out on Friday, we'll get this one out of the way. Hawaii at UC Santa Barbara. If Hawaii wins, they're outright Big West Conference champions. If Santa Barbara wins, then their Big West Conference championship lives to fight another day. First, Santa Barbara has to beat CSUN on Tuesday, which it would be tomorrow as of this recording. This is being recorded on November 21st, being a Monday. But for UC Santa Barbara, they have to take care of business against Northridge. They have to beat Hawaii, and then Hawaii has to lose to Northridge the day after. For Hawaii, they are flying in from Hawaii over to California. They do get a little bit of an advantage just because they do get to see what Santa Barbara has to offer against Northridge. Though Northridge is a very young team, and the film from them does not do them any justice. So they'll probably be better off using old film or just seeing like glimpses of the matches and seeing what they could do in order to slow down the Gauchos. But for the Gauchos, they have a chance to finish their home season, or they have the chance to finish the regular season undefeated at home, but they have to beat Northridge and they have to beat Hawaii. Hawaii's going to be the big challenge, and even if they beat Hawaii, they're not a lock to get into the NCAA tournament. They just don't have the resume to be an at-large. Jumping on over to the other notable matchups, we have number 9 Minnesota at number 8 Ohio State on Friday. This is big for the Buckeyes. If they have to run the table in order to have at least a chance at a Big Ten Conference co-championship. At best, they're probably going to be co-champions just because they just could not take care of business against Maryland and Indiana. It sucks because I have a lot of respect for Ohio State, especially after last week where they managed to beat, Nebraska and Purdue. Purdue on the road, mind you. But for Ohio State, winning against Minnesota would be huge, but Minnesota's a good defensive team. Ohio State's going to have to shake off these 2 losses and move on and get off the mat and just see what they can do. If all goes well, if all they can do is control what they can control. If all goes well and they actually manage to see themselves tied atop the Big Ten Conference Championship with Wisconsin and Nebraska, that would be huge for them. But for the Buckeyes, a lot has to go their way in order to become tri-conference champions with Nebraska and Ohio State. But it's always good to have this matchup under your belt to help improve your seeding. I feel Ohio State could be a 7 seed, maybe a 6 seed, depending on where the committee puts them and the other teams ahead of them. Also on Friday in the Big Ten, we have number 19 Purdue at number 11 Penn State. So Penn State and Purdue, obviously they're playing just to improve their possible NCAA tournament seed. I think Penn State can win this one just because this is the battle of 2 young teams. I really think Penn State has gotten better. Purdue, I feel, has regressed a little. I'm not trying to say Purdue is bad, but I just don't know if they can win at Rec Hall. Rec Hall is a hostile environment, and they are playing a very tough yet talented and scrappy Penn State team. Now jumping on over to the Conference Busters. In terms of the SEC, we have number 12 Florida at Ole Miss on Friday and on Saturday. And then we have South Carolina at number 16 Kentucky on Friday and on Saturday. Here's the thing. If both teams win out, they're co-conference champions. If both teams split, they're co-conference champions. If both teams lose out, they're co-conference champions. If one team splits and the other team wins out, that team that wins out is the conference champion. For Kentucky, they can't underestimate South Carolina. South Carolina, they have some chance at making the NCAA tournament, but South Carolina would have to win out. And then for Ole Miss, they have nothing left to lose, and they're playing at their home gym. They're playing in Mississippi. For them, I think Florida may have a good shot. Florida has a good shot at beating Ole Miss, but you can't underestimate anybody. This SEC year has been quite interesting just because the conference champion is going to have, at minimum, 3 losses. So those are those 2 matchups in terms of the SEC. Jumping on over back to the Pac-12, we have number 24 Washington at number 25 Washington State, aka the Apple Cup. Again, it's improving seeding. It's an improved seeding matchup for Washington State and for Washington. And for Washington State, they're obviously playing for their assistant coach, which I hope you get better. I hope he kicks Cancer's butt. But overall for Washington State, I really think that this is a big-time matchup for them. They've been in and out of the top 25, and this is their chance to prove themselves. I feel Washington State's in the tournament regardless. So I really think Washington State is going to prove themselves. I feel Washington has been so inconsistent, but don't tell them that. Washington has a big-time week this week. If they go 2-0, I think there might be some chance for them to gain momentum going into the NCAA tournament. But Washington State is improved, and then USC, they're trying to prove themselves one more time before they move on into the NCAA tournament, should they make it. And then I guess another notable matchup to watch for is UCLA at USC. So UCLA, they're going to need all the wins they can get in order to make the NCAA tournament. Sorry. And then I don't think USC is a big-time win should UCLA win, but USC does have a win over Oregon, which is impressive. They lost to Stanford in 5 the second go-around, lost to Oregon in 5 the second go-around. They lost to Washington State the first and only meeting. So USC doesn't have the true big-time wins, but it would be kind of beneficial. I feel USC is receiving votes, but for UCLA, I think beating Washington State and USC would probably better their chances of making the NCAA tournament. That's all the notable matches to watch for. Jumping on over to the definitely noteworthy matches, and these are the true conference busters. We'll start off with the lower of the conferences, the AAC. Number 22 Houston at number 23 UCF. Houston is ahead of the AAC by 1 full game. Here's the thing. Before these two play on Friday, Houston travels to USF, or South Florida, while UCF plays Tulane on Wednesday at UCF. So for Houston, if they win on Wednesday against USF, they're at least co-conference champions. But for UCF, they're trying to avenge their early loss to the Cougars as the Knights are going to try to win out this week. So they have the advantage of playing at home. But for Houston, I feel that Houston might give UCF problems. But you never know with UCF. I think UCF is going to be just as good. And this is definitely noteworthy matchup to watch for. This may not be the biggest conference there is, but AAC is just as big. And for UCF, they were undefeated up until a little while when I think they lost to Kansas, and then Houston kind of derailed them. And Houston is a quiet team. They don't have too many bad losses. I don't think they have any bad losses at all. They even took a set off of Texas. So for Houston, they could be a sneaky good team. But like I said a few episodes back, Houston probably goes as far as like maybe the Sweet 16. They just don't have the depth to like keep up with some of the other teams. And then another definitely noteworthy matchup to watch for. By the way, Houston and UCF play on Friday. Another definitely noteworthy matchup to watch for is number 13 Georgia Tech at number 7 Pitt. That is on Wednesday. Here's the thing for Pitt. Pitt and Louisville are tied atop the ACC standings with one more match to go. Well, actually, Louisville is a half a game ahead of them, but Louisville plays Notre Dame on Wednesday while Pitt has Georgia Tech. Pitt, I think, can win this one, but you cannot underestimate Georgia Tech that has Lava Girl, a.k.a. Julia Bergman. I really think Julia Bergman has stepped up her play, and she is probably going to be a Conference Player of the Year nominee, if not an AVCA Player of the Year nominee. I really think that Georgia Tech can win this one. Like, Georgia Tech can't win the conference, but they have nothing left to lose. All they can do is just improve their seeding, and I think they're going to at least be a top 16 seed. For Pitt, this is their chance to prove that their loss against Louisville was just Louisville being a top 5 team and not Pitt being bad. They definitely have to get up off the mat, and they have to take care of business against Georgia Tech. I should also make note that Pitt also plays Boston College at home on Saturday, so Fitzgerald Fieldhouse is going to need all of Pitt's support. Now we got to get on, now finishing off the definitely noteworthy matches, everything else is pretty much Big Ten Conference. Starting on Friday, we have number 3 Wisconsin at number 5 Nebraska. This is my match of the week right here. This is basically what could decide who is conference champion, who is co-conference champion, and who basically is going to get a top 4 seed. For Wisconsin, if they win, they are pretty much a lock to be a top 4 seed. Like, everyone thought Wisconsin was going to digress just because they don't have the same team as last year. Nope. I had complete faith in this team. I knew this team was going to be worthy of something special, and they've really turned it around. Danielle Hart is one of many players that has done outstanding work for the Badgers this year. Obviously, if you know her story, she tore her ACL last year, and she missed all of last year. But now she has come back, and she has been a catalyst as a senior for the Badgers. For Nebraska, however, they're playing this game in Lincoln, mind you, at the Bob. If Nebraska wins, this pretty much all but guarantees them as a top 4 seed. Well, then this kind of begs the question, where does Louisville fall in all of this? And do they jump San Diego? Just because Louisville handed San Diego their only loss of the season. Would San Diego drop from number 2 all the way to number 5 based off of Louisville having that one win over the Toreros, and then Nebraska having beaten Wisconsin and possibly being Big Ten Conference champions? But more on that later. But this is going to be a big barn burner right here. This is Wisconsin's chance to prove themselves, as this is definitely going to really test them. Like, Nebraska is going to be all over them. It's a very loud and spirited crowd. I really think that Nebraska is going to be in full force. Remember, they had 300 sellouts last week, and I'm pretty sure they're keeping that 300 straight sellouts going from last week. I'm pretty sure that streak is still intact. But overall, Nebraska-Wisconsin, that's going to have fireworks right there. You want to know what else is in store for Wisconsin? Saturday's matchup, as they head down to Covelli Center to take on Ohio State. So, again, this is big time right here. This won't mean anything if Wisconsin beats Nebraska, but for Ohio State, if they want a chance to be a top 4 seed, they will have to beat Wisconsin, and they also have to beat Minnesota as well. So this is a huge week for Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Nebraska. And I guess Minnesota as well, but they aren't in the running for the Big Ten Conference Championship, so I digress. But for Ohio State, I guess they don't have much to lose. They're playing at Covelli Center. That's going to be packed as well. So Wisconsin is going to be really tested on the road this week. This is why I called after their matchup against Rutgers, the gauntlet. Penn State, at Nebraska, and at Ohio State. That is a gauntlet right there. And they're going to have to prove themselves why they're the NCAA champions, and they're also going to have to prove why they're the Big Ten Conference champions, in terms of reigning, of course. And then closing out the definitely noteworthy matchups, we have number 9 Minnesota at number 5 Nebraska. That's also a Saturday matchup. Again, this won't really have too much of an impact if Wisconsin beats Nebraska, but if Nebraska beats Wisconsin and then Wisconsin loses out, Nebraska would be the outright Big Ten Conference champion. If Wisconsin splits their matchup, if they lose to Nebraska but then they beat Ohio State and then Nebraska wins out, then Nebraska is basically the outright, or Nebraska and Nebraska and Wisconsin are both Big Ten Conference champions. They both share the conference championship, and then both teams are probably going to be top 4 seeds, in my honest opinion. And then if Nebraska loses out, and then I guess if Ohio State wins out, then Ohio State would be second in the Big Ten, and I imagine they could jump Nebraska, but I don't know. I mean, Nebraska beat Ohio State in 5 the first time around, but lost to them in 4 the second time around. So, overall, this is a big week for Nebraska, Ohio State, and Wisconsin. Wisconsin has the most pressure because they're on the road, and that target on their back that was planted on them in the beginning of the season, it's grown, and now this is kind of their climax. You've got Nebraska, at Nebraska. Then the day after, you are at Ohio State. I imagine there's going to be tired legs. But this is what Kelly Sheffield's team has to do. This is why you are champions. If you want to repeat as champions, you got to be like champions. And this is their chance to prove themselves. And this is their chance to basically lock up a top 4 seed and lock up the Big Ten Conference. For Nebraska, I feel a win over Wisconsin pretty much guarantees them as a top 4 seed. But they can't underestimate Minnesota as well. Yes, they are going to be at the Bob against Minnesota, but Minnesota is a good defensive team. They always have good defensive teams, and I don't think Minnesota is anything to sneeze at. So for Nebraska, they have to be careful. And then Ohio State closing out their season against Minnesota and Wisconsin. That is huge right there. This is why you scheduled those tough non-conference matchups. So for Ohio State, this is kind of their prove that last week was nothing more than a fluke. But again, Ohio State needs a lot to happen in order for them to become tri-conference champions. Again, they have to hope that Wisconsin loses out, and then Nebraska splits with them beating Wisconsin, and then Ohio State has to win out. If that all happens, then Ohio State is tri-conference champions with Wisconsin and Nebraska. But that is going to do it for the matchups to watch for in the final week of the NCAA women's volleyball season. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. Let's drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Set Point. I appreciate you all tuning in. If you listen live, I appreciate you. If you listen on the playback, I appreciate you. If you listen at work, I appreciate you. If you listen at any time, any place, anywhere, I definitely appreciate you. Happy early Thanksgiving to everybody, as no matter what happens, I'm going to be continuing to watch the volleyball action, even on Thanksgiving break. I hope everyone here has a happy and safe Thanksgiving. Definitely hug your loved ones. Definitely spend time with them, just because family is everything, and family over everything is essential. For everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. Like I said, have a great Thanksgiving. Have a great rest of the week. We are 1 week away from the NCAA Women's Volleyball Tournament. We've gotten this far, as I also got to thank the chat room. Got to thank my boy Larry D for listening in. Appreciate you tuning in. He says, great show, Teran. Means a lot. Thank you to Adam Karnick and Mike Patton who popped in. I appreciate you. I'm not sure what I'm going to do for SoCal Senior Sports Show. I might do it this Friday. I might do it earlier in advance, but we'll see. Till then, have a great Thanksgiving. I'll see you on the other side. Peace!